Russia moves in and takes Ukraine, immediately get it taken care of. If you let it go on, everything that Alex just said happens, right? We deplete munitions, we make sure that we don't have anything to be able to fight a war, but we also push China into the arms of Russia because these guys are enemies. They're not naturally bedfellows, right? The enemy of my enemy is my friend, and so these guys are doing business together. That only makes it worse knowing that we're not going to put an end to this, that we're going to drag it out forever. And if you want to go take Taiwan, it looks like now's the right time to do it.
There have always been tensions between China, Russia, and the United States and many of the countries. That's decades long. But they weren't escalating. And in fact, many of the nations de-escalated. When Russia took over the Crimea, that was in 2014, that was under the Obama administration, and then they backed down. Same thing with Georgia when they took that over, also during the Obama administration, and during Trump, they backed down. And we saw China didn't threaten to take over Taiwan during the Trump administration. We saw that North Korea stopped firing missiles under the Trump administration. We saw that Iran, as much as they were upset, had less funding for global terror because the Iran nuclear deal was stopped, which lowered the net global terror in the world. Things got stable. Now, I'm not saying that you have to love President Trump. That's not the point. But the point is, the fear that was ratcheted up wasn't justified. We didn't have events that equated to what we were being told we should be terrified of. But the terror didn't go away because the problems didn't go away. And that brings us to just 2 days ago, when we announced ahead of the entire major news media the very simple fact that the conflict in Russia was getting worse. The Biden administration has completely failed, much like they failed in Afghanistan. They handed over Afghanistan to the Taliban, a recognized terrorist organization, and abandoned somewhere between 479 and 2,000 Americans, proving that the Biden administration lied to Americans to their face when he said it was only 100 people who were abandoned. Mind you, no American should have been abandoned, but it was actually more than 400% more than what Joe Biden told the American people. In fact, to this day, he still hasn't admitted how many people he abandoned in that country to the gentle care of terrorists. And now that same administration is negotiating with Vladimir Putin, someone we were assured he had control. He had the balls to stand up to Vladimir Putin and to call him a killer, not to his face, and to say that the United States is strong. And we're so strong that when Secretary Blinken and when Biden have talked to Russia, Russia doesn't care. It has now been confirmed that that is exactly what the State Department has said, that they will not send a C-130 plane from our bases in Germany to Kiev to pick up the women and children, civilians that are in Russia and Ukraine right this second. It means that for all the bluster that is being put forward, it's only bluster. You see, if the United States was serious, wouldn't we get our American citizens out of there? Wouldn't we send a C-130? It's a reiteration of the same lack of care that we saw in Afghanistan. Now, you may like Joe Biden. That's perfectly fine. That's your choice. We hear that right now, Joe Biden is now considering putting in U.S. troops. They're on alert. We could possibly, the question is, could the United States put troops into war in Ukraine? The answer to that question is...
Well, I think the Ukrainians need F-16s yesterday. I think I would do more on the military front.
We are in a troubling position. And at a time where we need to have strength, we are absolutely not getting that. This is from the UK, just prior to the China yelling, scolding the United States, telling us we don't have the power to tell them what to do and that we should submit to China's will. One of the most terrifying responses I saw came from Peyton Ford, who's 23 out and she lives in North Carolina. She says, the U.S. government 100% considers China to be an adversary. Any country that threatens the U.S.'s place as an economic power in the world would be seen as an enemy. Add the ideological differences, spying and hacking allegations, and the general Asian American and Pacific Islander discrimination of China, and I wouldn't be surprised if the majority of Americans feel the same way. But she doesn't agree. She has no strong feelings towards China. She has no strong feelings towards the ideological differences between communism and capitalism. She has no strong feelings towards spying against the United States, hacking the United States. This is our next generation. These are the next leaders. And you're telling me that that's not a problem? That China isn't looking at that and saying, oh my God, this is great. The gravy train has finally hit. We've been waiting, and here it is.
Which led to the biggest embarrassment of the United States, I believe, in the history of the United States. We've had the White House burned down before. We've had fights with Indians and Russians, the British. We've had bad battles, including Vietnam, absolutely. But we have never been embarrassed as a nation. It's one thing to lose. It's another thing to run with your tail between your legs, leaving every valuable asset you have behind, and the most valuable asset being American citizens. 5,000 American citizens were left in Afghanistan to this day, not to ever be mentioned again by the Biden-Harris administration or any of the Democrats and progressives. They will not speak about them. In fact, at this point, not even Republicans will speak about them. That is an immense signal. That was the trigger. That brought us to where we are today. What that said to the world is, to each and every ally of America, don't trust America. If we will not protect our own civilians, these aren't even military, civilians, women and children, fathers and single men, we won't protect our people to get them out of a hostile nation, then why in the hell would we ever protect any other ally? Who would we actually fight for if we will not fight for our own? Something the rest of the world has been terrified of. The initial reaction after the Twin Towers, 9/11, the world was terrified that America was going to drop nuclear bombs on any and every country we suspected might have been involved in that day. That entire week, the world was on pins and needles, expecting us to bomb to hell anyone and everyone that we were angry with as a nation. They were terrible. You don't mess with America. You don't mess with American civilian people. You want to attack the military? That's one thing. You attack civilians, we're going to have a very different reaction because Joe Biden wanted to make a deadline for the newspapers, for politics. He left behind weapons and munition and money and bases, all operational. There was a pre-made army sitting in the world. We now have a new world player, an army that never existed before, that should never exist to this day. It's called the Taliban, and everyone in the Middle East has to be afraid of them because they have American weapons and lots of them. And that told every one of our allies, don't trust America, but it also told every one of our enemies, China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia, well, now's the time. It was immediately after that Russia decided, well, we're going to go back into the Ukraine and we want the eastern southern portions. We're going back in, we're going to take over that land. It was immediate at that time that China decided, we're going to go into Taiwan, and not only are we going in, we're going in with force. We're going to take it over by force, no problem. We're just not telling you when. And North Korea decided, you know what? It's time for fireworks. Let's just shoot off every hypersonic missile that we can find. And they shot off, depending on who counts, 75 to 90 missiles and ICBMs. A total that is so high that no president in any 4-year period had ever had matched that. They fired more missiles in 1 year than any president in 4 years combined. When we look at that, that leads us to the situation that we have right now.